Hi, I'm David Manti with Cannabis Equipment News, and with me today is Cullen Reichart, CEO and founder of Green Bros. Thank you very much for joining me today, Cullen.
Well, thanks for taking the time and to talk to me. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, that's it truly is a pleasure. Could you start by telling me a little bit about your company? What does Green Bros do?
So Green Bros is, well, at the base of it, we're an equipment manufacturing company, but we're also a design engineer company. And we've kind of moved from being just single source equipment based to more of a solutions oriented company. As the market changes, you start to see the need for more intelligent equipment and so forth and so on. And so we're kind of leading that charge into a bigger automated picture for the industry.
Could you tell me a little bit about how the company started? Not the entire history, but it has a pretty cool origin story.
Yeah, so I grew for a while, wasn't really that good at it, but I did realize early on that there were a lot of opportunities for equipment, and I've always been inventive, and I kind of saw some opportunities, and actually was commissioned by a friend of mine to invent the Alchemist, the dry sifting machine, which was my first product, and that's the first product we actually got a patent on that had it actually says cannabis in the patent paperwork, which is pretty cool, right?
Right, yeah.
And that's really where it started. I built that machine in my garage back in 2012, and then went on a road show thinking I was gonna, set the world on fire.
It's interesting that you talk about building it in your garage, because one of the things that I've heard about in this industry is that there's not enough garage tinkerers. There's not enough people that have kind of been doing it on their own. So when they kind of get into the commercial side of the business, they know how to run from an operational standpoint. Is that something that you've noticed?
Well, so we coined a term, we call it industry born. And I think for us, maybe this answers the question. I apologize if I go around in a circle here, but for us, that means that everything that I designed and developed and that the team now designs and develops is all about cannabis, right? So we come from cannabis. We design for cannabis. We build for cannabis. We think about cannabis first, second, and always, So it's all about how do you manage the cannabis plant specifically, which is different than any other plant. Some guys bring stuff in from outside and they try to adapt it and do these things. And there's varying degrees of success with that. But cannabis specifically has very specific needs, right? It's the flower, the most delicate part of the plant, with the trichomes and all of that kind of real important structure that brings the most value, right? So if you don't approach it with that in mind, you end up with kind of, damaging products or violent operations that just don't really suit the actual product itself. So, that's how we approach it. Now, I think that because the industry came in and there's so much ag products out there, that a lot of people have been somewhat lazy, if you will, by like reaching out into existing products and saying, oh, well, we could use that here. And it just, it doesn't work as well as it should at best and fails miserably at worst.
Well, do you find yourself replacing a lot of that equipment where they try using more of a traditional ag piece of equipment and you go in and you're like, this is not even close to applicable for this plant? Yeah,
I mean, there's that side of it. Usually they're coming in and saying, yeah, we should never have, it's funny because you walk into a company and there'll be, $500,000 worth of equipment sitting in the back collecting dust. And as a business owner myself, I don't find that to be a very affordable model. It just doesn't really work to spend that kind of money on equipment and mothball it. But it happens a lot because, like as in any industry or any business, you go onto that car lot, for instance, and you buy that shiny car and you really needed a truck. Or vice versa. And you can get caught up in that kind of like that. Wow, this company has all this reputation. They have all this experience and they're so successful in potato chips. It doesn't work that way.
You talk a little bit about the capital investment with some of this equipment, and what have you noticed through the pandemic, and what are your expectations for capital investment kind of going forward?
So that's actually a great question, because I think as an industry we're maturing, right? And you're seeing people come in to run cannabis businesses that historically ran other businesses that have more established capital expenditure understanding, right? So for instance, a Twinkie machine, I think I'd say that Twinkie machine will cost you $25 million, right? And it's as long as a warehouse, but it makes Twinkies. You pour everything in one end and Twinkies come out the other end. Well, that company looks at that and goes, well, we're going to make 50 billion Twinkies with this machine. It's worth every penny of the money, right? Cannabis is just starting to understand that. But the problem with it is there's no cannabis machine that is like the Twinkie machine, right? And there's no history of that. So people are having to look at automation and say, well, what really is possible? And then what's that going to cost me? And then oftentimes they go, oh my God, the cost. Well, amortize your costs, really evaluate what you're going to gain out of it. And you see that these pieces of equipment make all the sense in the world if it's designed properly and it functions properly. Then the price is kind of not the primary driver for a purchase of a piece of equipment. It becomes, because, and the other problem too, and it just briefly, the other problem is that we're just now getting to where companies can write off and take loss on stuff, right? So they have that ability now to actually use a piece of equipment properly. We buy equipment and we write it off against the income, and that changes our balance sheet at the end of the year and changes our tax base, right? That's the point. And companies haven't had that opportunity because of the federal situation around cannabis, right? So now that opportunity is becoming more available because companies, they're structured correctly and they have legal protections in the states and stuff like that. So buying a bigger piece of equipment is a better option because they can realize both the depreciation and the gain in production that the equipment supplies. So.
When did that go into effect? I guess I didn't realize that those tax write-offs were available to companies yet.
So, I mean, I don't even know. I can't even say for sure that they are. I just know that there are companies who understand that and that they are amortizing that equipment, right? So they're looking at that differently. So federally, we still have the big problem of not being 100% recognized. So you're not seeing companies who get traditional banking and financing for equipment, right? Because they can't really see that. They're only realizing half the picture, right? So I can't even say, I mean, obviously, I think that there are ways where one company owns equipment and another company does this sort of business where this company can write off that piece of equipment sort of thing. But I mean, I'm not an accountant or a CPA.
No, I understand that. And has that hamstrung your business at all where there aren't these traditional methods of financing? And so, you're kind of unable to sort of get money up front to design a machine for somebody and then sort of get paid in a traditional manner for capital equipment.
Yeah. So there's two sides to that story for us, right? There's the half sale side, right? So a company sees it as just an expenditure, and the only value that they're going to get out of the equipment is the increase in productivity. Mm-hmm. That's a great value, but it's only half the picture. And then the other side of that is that companies can't really find quality financing within the industry, right? So there are companies that finance equipment for cannabis companies. And they'll write that equipment down, right? So we do have partners that help to do these financing deals, but you have these really cash heavy companies who produce a lot of revenue month to month and don't have banking. They don't have anybody to provide that reserve or that big investment for them. And that definitely changes how this company's grown and how this company can grow, right? So let's say that I came into company X and we said, look, here's a system, we can design and build it for you, and it's going to cost you, $1.2 million. And a cannabis company is going to have to evaluate how they're going to do $1.2 million, right? Whereas as my company, I call a financing company and say, hey, listen, this is our revenues, this is what it looks like, and I need this equipment. And they go, yeah, we'll do it, and we'll do it at whatever 6%, and here you go, and dominus ominous, off you go. And so then everything for me looks really traditional, except for our lending is still as problematic as anybody else's, because I get equipment financing and equipment loans because that's done through equipment companies, but I don't get banking support that you would expect from a manufacturing company. For a manufacturing company.
Right. Earlier, you had mentioned that you're kind of moving away from standalone products to entire systems. Could you talk? So are you trying to build the Twinkie machine for the cannabis industry?
Got it, man. That's exactly right. Yeah. So, I mean, the idea, the concept for people to understand is that there's that, but they have to understand what their end goal is, right? And a lot of companies are still trying to figure that out. We've seen companies, invest heavily into a marketing strategy and packaging and then abandon that before they even get the materials in, right? So there's still a lot of growth happening. And you have a lot of companies who haven't really established their presence or their branding 100%. And so they're not sure if they're going to be producing, pre-rolls 20% and extracts and at whatever percentage, and then flower. So there's that understanding. But once these companies get a more mature understanding of that, then it's just creating the system that you put the product in here and it comes out in whatever package form you need it, whatever finalized form that you need it. So it is very much going to be that. I mean, that's not a matter of if, it's just a when question. And that when question is becoming clearer as we move farther down the road.
So are you designing equipment that's more for large scale operations, or do you also have solutions that are for more of the mom and pops?
So when I started, I and I never sold one of these. I had my first system that I designed back or when I actually got funded for this to start this company. I had put a trimmer on top of my Alchemist, and that was my first system, right? You trim, the trim goes into the Alchemist, you pull the trimmer off, you put the lid on the Alchemist, spin the Alchemist, out comes, so you've processed your buds and your keef, and you've created this deal. So that was the first system that I designed. And at the time, people were really only looking at trimmers, and they were only looking at trimmers in this little window, right? So harvest would come, everybody bought a stinking trimmer, and then the rest of the year, nobody was thinking about anything. And so actually after they're done harvesting, then you get people buying Alchemists or whatever. And then came destemmers and our sorting machine and things like that. Now you're starting to see people, but still people will approach it with this idea that, I need to solve this problem. We're like, wait a minute, why don't we look at the whole system? What if I could solve 3 or 4 of your problems at once? Right? What if I could increase your throughput through all these different segments of your production facility? What if we can do that? And that conversation is a little bit more difficult in this environment because, again, no exposure, no Twinkie machines on the market, no understanding of what the value brings of that continued or higher level of automation. And that's just an education issue. It doesn't have anything to do with anything other than exposure and education in the marketplace.
So after you educate sort of the people with purchasing power in the company and they bring the systems in, do you run into issues with, sort of the people on the floor being capable of running the machines appropriately?
So training is always a key part of any piece of equipment. And any piece of equipment has a certain kind of finickiness or kind of a getting used to where you work yourself in, you understand it. And that's an operator, a person that really wants to learn and understand a piece of equipment. I think for us, we've always been the show and tell company. We started by bringing machines to people's businesses, and then we would show them, we'd do a demo and show them how the machine worked, and then show them how to use the machine, and then support by video and so forth. And we still kind of follow that model, right? So to teach somebody how to use a piece of equipment. We have internally, we do see one, do one, teach one. And so in order to gain mastery over anything in our shop, you have to see it, then you have to do it, and then you have to show somebody else how to do it. And if you get to that point, then you are, you're a qualified operator that, we can trust to continuously do this job at X level. Same thing exists in the field, and we try to impart that to the people that we sell equipment to.
Throughout your entire line card, what are the most popular pieces of equipment that you guys offer?
So the trimmer is still king. I mean, trimmers are still king because everybody sees the value in a trimmer right away. And it's easy. It's an easy one to communicate. The second on that list would be the sorting machine. If you've ever sorted a pound of cannabis, you see the value in this machine very, very quickly. But it's harder, a little bit more difficult to tell the story of how a rise conveyor feeding a trimmer all of a sudden, increases the trimming potential by X, right? Because people generally tend to look at problems like that as labor problems instead of equipment problems. So they'll go, well, yeah, why would I spend that much money on that machine when I got a guy that I'm paying this amount and he can do it? And the answer is that the reason you do that is because that guy could be doing something much more valuable and make a lot more money for you than just putting stuff into a machine when you have a machine that puts stuff into a machine, right? And then the rise conveyor can feed more than one trimming machine. So you can kind of expand that value point for that piece of equipment by just being creative or working with us and letting us help you understand what that value is.
What is the largest scale operation that you've gone into, and what is the smallest scale operation that you've gone into?
I think I'll say, so for commercial facilities, I've been in 1 million square feet of canopy. And it's almost, it's breathtaking because when you see what a company like that is doing, they're producing, a greenhouse size room daily. So they're processing, 1,000 to 1,500, 1,800 pounds every day. So the machine it's massive movement of cannabis through this whole craziness, and they're struggling to get process and management of product flow and refine all their their value points so that they could get all those systems better and better and better. And a company like us, we can come in and show you and talk to them and say, hey, we can solve this transport issue for you. And if we use that transport solution to feed this, then we've solved two things for you. And now, now we're starting to see efficiency gains. And then that communication's easy in a big market like that, because that's a huge company and they see the waste, they see the problems, right? They have a crew of 50 people that does the trimming,
Yeah.
and they're using machines. So it's 50 people and machines. So I think that's the biggest. And then the smallest, I think, and I wouldn't call it small. I mean, the smaller companies that we do business with, they tend to be more craft oriented, right? And just are on their way up. And you walk in and they may have 2 or 3 grow rooms, but they're still cycling. They're still working on this concept these guys do on a daily basis. They're doing it on a like a 3-week or a 4-week basis, where a room is coming down every couple of weeks, and they're still pushing through. So they still have the same exact problem. It's just the volume is different. So, of course, obviously I've been to friends' houses who have grow lights in their closets.
True.
But I don't sell a lot of machines to those guys.
Understood. Talking about that process management side, could you talk a little bit? I mean, because it is, like you said, it's a very delicate plant and also a very harsh material when you're processing it. Could you talk a little bit about like cleaning, maintenance of these products, and sort of what is required for upkeep?
Yeah. So one of the things when I was in service, we used to have airplanes on a schedule, and they used to do these airplanes. They had a yearly schedule. So every 7 days they had one inspection. Then every 14 days there was an additional inspection. Every 28 days. So it was a cycle that went all the way up to 365 days. On that big inspection, they break it all the way down and clean it all the way out. Right. That we're not nearly that complex in the cannabis space, but what you do have is you have people who have a consciousness about having to break down equipment and get into the nooks and crannies and keep it clean, right? And we see that more and more with regulation coming in. There's a need to, especially in Health Canada, my gosh, they come in and they white glove stuff and they dig in the cracks and the crevices, right? And they're looking for stuff. So when I started the company, we started working with food safe materials, thinking that, this is going to hit regulation and people are going to need this equipment when regulation hits. So if we go food safety, we've created a little bit of a barrier with the regulation folks, right? We graduated quickly with the Model M series and the stainless steel series of equipment to, we graduated quickly to simple breakdown. So my machines can come all the way apart to the point where they need to be cleaned in 2 or 3 minutes. And then they can be cleaned completely. Every surface is accessible. Every aspect of the machine can be cleaned, and then it can be put back together. And so you can be in and out or change strains or whatever it is that your process is. You can be in and out of it very, very quickly. And that's really important because some companies, not all, but some companies in some states require equipment to be cleaned between strains. Mm-hmm. That's mind-boggling to me, right? You're running this, but it makes sense, but it's still like, gosh, can you imagine breaking down your whole production system because you changed from Kush to sour diesel or whatever, I mean, to me, it's kind of crazy, but and so we see that still just being another part of the value add, right? Making it very accessible, easy to clean. And we use 316 stainless steel on all of our contact points because it's surgical grade. It has the highest resistance to contamination and the highest resistance to carrying bacteria and stuff like that. So super high quality materials, simple cleaning.
So one of the things that I find interesting is your engineering background. And I have a history in design engineering in terms of interviewing a lot of design engineers. And one of the things that I'm always kind of interested in is that a design engineer is never done improving something. So as a design engineer, how do you know when you have a product that's ready for the market and when to stop designing while also maybe doing R&D, designing, planning for the future?
Man, that is an excellent question because there's not a definitive point, right? Mm-hmm. You can't say, well, once we spent 6 months on this, we're good. Or once we get to Rev B, we're good. I think what it comes down to is, you have to start understanding when you can start to get your return. Right. And so is this product good enough? Because good enough never is. Good enough isn't, right? That's the answer. It's never going to be good enough. But is it sellable and maintainable? And does it bring value to the customer? And once you get to that, once you get those 3 things in the positive, then you can bring it out to market. And we tend to bring things out to market and still make changes. Because 2 things. First of all, we're always looking for the minimal improvements that add the maximum value, right? And that's a communication with the customer. So these machines go out, the customers start bringing in feedback. We go back at it. We look at these things and we make changes. Or you test and test and test and test, and everything works good, and then you throw it out in the field and something goes bing, and you're like, wait, well, how did we not and so you have to go in and make a change that's a functional change. But generally, once you get to that place where your product has reached the point where it's adding value to your customer, like I said, and it's sellable and it's maintainable, then that's a good basis point. Then we've changed. So first it was just a reactionary kind of situation, right? Where we need a machine that does this. We need a machine that does that. We need a machine that does this one, and then that, and then we're trying to react and fill the market holes. But we've gotten to the point where we don't do that anymore, and we're planning out product development and product life cycle. So what you're seeing is a completely different focus from the company in that we're pushing towards these systems. So the next iteration of things isn't necessarily better trimmer. It's more automated trimmer. It's the transport in and out of the trimmer to the next step. Those are the things that we're focusing on and bringing that kind of stuff together, right? So, but that has a life cycle of its own as well, right? At some point in time, we'll reach base system, and then you're going, well, all right, there's a need out there for this level, and then you start developing into that, and so it's interesting, I think the answer is we never stop thinking about how to improve anything that we make. We look at everything we make, and there are machines that we have that have been there for a couple of years that haven't changed, and what do you do with that? At some point you replace it,
right? How do you blend between what you see as potential really good improvements to products? How do you marry that with customer feedback in terms of what your plan is for future equipment?
That's a tough answer because you can't fix everything. You just can't, because there's a guy out there that does everything left-handed, and and you're like, I don't even know how to make this better for this one situation, and what's the time and energy it's going to take to make that better for that one situation versus what the bulk of my production and sales require. So, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to, say anything about left-handedness. It's just as an example, but to address just something like that, maybe there's a better conversation around process that can address that specific issue versus an equipment change or an upgrade, or redesign. So that's one of those questions, that you have to kind of evaluate on a case by case basis. I mean, forever and ever and ever, I've heard, we need a big leafer. There's got to be a machine that big leafs, a big leaf. And I look at that space and I go, I don't have the time, energy, and money to go after big leafing, because we have so much time, energy, and money being put into the other solutions we're providing, right? So there's still a market hole and a need here for this, but I'm not pursuing it. And that's a decision, a business decision based on what we perceive the market to be, and the value of that machine, putting engineering dollars into that machine versus putting engineering dollars into what we see the market is going. I can only do one of those two things.
What is big leafing?
Taking off the big leaves before you hang it and dry it.
Oh, okay.
So it's fan leafing.
Okay.
I mean, this is something that this is what's so crazy, right? So everything that requires a lot of work and a lot of labor is what gets attacked, right? We started with trimming because it was the obvious, easy, long pull. Once trimming's handled, you start seeing people attacking destemming, and then sifting and sorting and all these other things. And you go, oh, see, but that first attack has always been trimming, because it was easy lift. It was the biggest problem to solve. And we just keep going after it that way. And then you have to decide whether these needs in the industry are something worth pursuing.
You're right. No, I mean, it's a challenge that any company encounters.
Absolutely.
So how has the current global pandemic, how has COVID-19 affected Green Bros?
That's so obviously we follow protocols here. So everybody walks around with a mask on. We don't have the ability to be, socially distanced in every instance, but we do have pretty good markers and boundaries for most interactions. And we do have a pretty good, some line work requires some closer interaction. So as a company, we're doing the things that we feel are keeping us in compliance with the best guidelines we can go by right now, which is CDC, right? So But from a sales perspective, we never really saw any change.
Really?
We were fortunate because we were considered to be essential business as a manufacturing company.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think we, as a group, you know, as a group of people, there's just a real gratitude for being able to be still working and producing when a lot of the people that we know, you know, aren't. Or are struggling, you know, now coming back, obviously, but, you know, maybe we're looking at re-lockdown. I don't know. So I find it really kind of an interesting situation. I think what it did for our customers is interesting, because I think our customers, also being considered essential business, cannabis,
Right.
they struggled with labor because, you know, oftentimes they're even tighter than we are. We have room in our warehouse to create the space. They don't necessarily have that same opportunity. And what we saw was a push for people looking for automation. And I think it's brought a consciousness back to the industry, but we didn't see any drop off in sales because of the pandemic.
No, I think it's something that isn't said often enough, how manufacturing was deemed an essential business and just how many people are going to work still every day.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. I mean, I think about that a lot, and I can't imagine not being. This is what I do.
Yeah.
I love my wife, and we get to spend most of the time together. But this is how I fulfill my mind and keep
Right.
myself healthy in my, you know, I think. You know.
Yeah. No, I have an opinion on what the other side of that is like, but I don't think I need to record that. So my wife here said no. No, my what I'm interested, because my entire family is a manufacturing family. Everyone's still, you know, dad's an engineer, brothers are plant managers and product designers, stuff like that. So they've all gone back to work with teams. And I mean, now literally our entire media office is empty and it's just the three of us that have kind of commandeered the space. So I definitely have a personal appreciation for everyone going to work still.
Yeah, it's great. And just to be able to offer that opportunity to my employees and make sure that, you know, they're still able to take care of their families. And it means a lot to me to still be functioning. You know, there's a lot of value in that. And so I'm very grateful. I know, and I know how hard, because I'm in Vegas, so we know how hard service has been hit. It's just been absolutely decimated, and it's really, really hard to see all those people just, you know, they're struggling, man. And there's really not anything. There doesn't look like there's an end in sight for it. I mean, I don't know when it'll bounce back or if. I mean, because there's people talking about if, and I think that's crazy, you know.
Yeah, no, it is crazy to hear about when people speculate what might and might not come back.
Yeah. We don't know, obviously, but it's yeah.
One of the things that I've always been kind of drawn to with cannabis industry is that it's a very passionate industry. Could you talk a little bit about what it's like, or if you don't experience that, you know, what it's like kind of working with people that want to be in the industry and kind of believe in sort of the power of the plant?
Yeah, it's that, I mean, there's two things. First, it's young and interesting and vibrant, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of energy around that, and whether that passion is because of the value of the plant, or just being involved in what's new and happening. There's just, the industry itself is just full of a lot of buzz, right? It's zooming along, man. And there's always plenty to do and plenty of work to accomplish. And what I think is cool is I'm hiring people who are, you know, engineers, welders, equipment operators, and you know, they have historical life experience, and they come to me, and I'm an opportunity for them to get into the industry. Right. Mm-hmm. We don't have any plants here. We don't do any growing, but they still get that opportunity. And they're like, yeah, man, I get to be a part of this thing. And I think it's really valuable because, you know, again, you know, you get a young guy out of college, an engineer, and he's going to be, you know, more cannabis focused in his just life experience than a seasoned professional engineer. And he comes in, and we provide this opportunity to be right on hand side, hands on, right into development. And it's cannabis industry and cannabis support. I send them out to farms and see how the growers and everything does it. But that whole excitement even comes into our industry. We're an equipment manufacturer. We could be making lawnmowers, right? But we just happen to be in the cannabis side, and there's still excitement here, even though we're not touching. So I think it's really exciting. I love it because when I talk to a customer, I'm passionate about business and developing business. I'm passionate about making machines, and they're passionate about cannabis. And we have this mutual passion, right? Because I'm passionate to make them successful and build machines that serve their needs. They're passionate about getting this product out and getting it to as wide a marketplace as they can and providing the best product that they can. And so we can kind of share that, even though I'm standing in supply side or in equipment side, and they're standing in production side. So I like that. And you get a lot of that cross feed from through the industry, right? So and that passion, I don't know. I don't want to say it gets diminished when you see these big kind of corporate people taking over, and you see that becoming, it becomes more mechanized. But still, man, there's this underlying excitement about the growth of this industry and the passion around the industry, and we're a part of that. I mean, we call ourselves industry born because without the industry, we wouldn't be here. And if it wasn't for cannabis, we wouldn't have a focus. I joke about doing I wouldn't even know how to make a lawnmower, and I'm not even that interested in lawnmowers, man. I mean, I love this business. I love providing the equipment we provide. I love the people that we work with. I love the passion around the product that's being made. I love the science and the medicinal, but just the science around cannabis. Like, look at all the work that's being done to discover what cannabis is, and we're just understanding it. And then the CBD stuff. I mean, all that stuff is really, really exciting. And I just never personally I tried to grow, and it wasn't very good at it. My thumbs are brown. I don't know if you see that, but they're brown. They don't grow things. But I make machines, and I get to be a part of that as well. And so we're very integrated into the industry, and passionate about the industry. And we were talking about this year because, actually, I mean, last year was the first big year, the hemp year, right? And hemp is this massive market that just materialized out of nowhere. And a company like mine who does work on cannabis looks at that and goes, whoa, man, opportunity. Yeah. And we didn't, we really didn't. We really stopped and said, wait a minute, that's going to take away from this focus. And that focus is cannabis. And while there is cross pollination there, and a lot of of our I don't want to call them competitors. A lot of people in the space went after hemp, and rightfully so. Their equipment makes more sense for it. But we don't design for massive production. We design for quality and high value and manicuring and maintaining and producing the best quality, if it's medicine or for recreation, best quality cannabis you can produce. And that's our focus. So we didn't go that road intentionally, even though the money was and the opportunity was kind of screaming, you have to do this. We just said, wait a minute, this is who we are. This is what we do. Let's not stray from that. There's plenty to be done here, and there's plenty of growth here. So we just didn't stray away. That's not to say that we don't come up with something for that industry, but that would be somebody else's company. That would be, a little brother of Green Bros somewhere. That wouldn't necessarily be, a Green Bros focus, because we're really narrowed in on this product.
No, I applaud the discipline. I mean, you see far too many companies that kind of reach out for some of that stuff, and sometimes they become, they stretch too thin.
You can easily fall into that space, right? Where you invest a lot of time and energy. And we've done that in the past. and it can be very painful, and that's that piece of equipment sitting in the corner.
Yeah.
You're like, hey,
what's that?
Maybe
That's
that wasn't the right idea.
Yeah, that's going to be for the museum in the lobby.
That's
later.
right. That's exactly right.
So I just had one last question for you, and what's your prediction for the future, not just for Green Bros, but for the industry as a whole?
Man, I know where we're headed, and we're headed into the automation, integration of products and systems, and that's not just Green Bros products, but automated integration with other solutions. Like we're probably never going to go down the road of extraction. It's just not our expertise, but we can make equipment that makes that easier to operate and makes it easier to feed it and transport in and out of it, that kind of thing. So we see our future as being an integrator, and still leading the charge as far as development and product development goes, and systems and stuff like that. As far as the industry goes, it's really interesting because no one really could have predicted this because it was so massive underground before, right? Mm-hmm. It was such a massive underground market that was really established in doing business already, but it was doing it a certain way. So there was really no way to understand how that was going to pop out into the light, because you pull the covers off and you go, this doesn't work in the real world. We have to read it, and then you get the bureaucrats and the tax, blah, 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 and everybody puts their fingers in the pie and muddles it all up. So I think there was just such, I hate this word, but disclarity, right? Mm-hmm. It just was nothing to look at and say, this is going to pop into reality. And I think what we are seeing is, as corporate comes in, and it does, and it's going to, and you can't stop it, so don't worry about it. You can change how it interacts, but you can't stop it. What corporate provides, though, is structure within the confines of business rules, ethics, blah, 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 right? Mm-hmm. So that's good, because then that gives us all a basis for doing business together. And then they can, we can go get loans from banks and grow businesses and do all this other cool shit that these guys, so there's a lot of value in that. But I think a lot of people really worry about, the monopoly, the McDonald's kind of thing. There's room for that. Mm-hmm. There's still wonderful burger places aside from McDonald's. Yeah. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of McDonald's. There's Burger King and Wendy's, and there's plenty of competition at that level. Yeah. Cannabis is no different. There's going to be people at these different levels, and that's just how it's going to be. I mean, alcohol is the same way. It's going to be at these different levels, and that's okay. I don't know how exactly it's going to end up, but I think if you look at, if the market remains free and we remain in a free kind of capitalistic society where markets remain free, you're going to see all these different levels of business working at a myriad of different ways. If culturally we change, I don't know what it's going to look like, man. The government starts making cannabis, we're all in trouble because they're not going to be very good at it.
Well, that'll be the domestic, and then we'll still have the craft, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, just have a black market. That's right. That's how it works out. Yeah.
Right.
So I think that there was a big push. What's recently happened is, and sorry, going on a little bit for you, but no worries. I think what's recently happened is, this consolidation or conglomeration, and that's natural and it's going to happen. But you've also seen a couple of big boys go bye-bye, right? Yeah. Overextend, misvalue, misplace asset, bad leadership. When the leadership's spending your money faster than you're making it, you got a problem. So we've seen all that, but that's normal, right? We see that in every other marketplace as well. So what we're seeing is cannabis become normalized, cannabis become business normal, and you're seeing all the pitfalls and all the great stories that you see in other business and other markets. This is just new. right? So it's not different than any other commodities, I don't think, market. It's just new. So there's interest and like passion, like we talked about earlier, around it, but it's no different than any other marketplace. You'll see it do the same things, I think, in the long run.
Well, thanks again very much for taking the time today, Cullen. I really do appreciate it. For Cannabis Equipment News, I'm David Manti, and we'll see you next week.